Hello, this is Barry O'Connell, and this is my Maryland politics review. This week, or actually this time, I usually do this on Sundays, but I decided to do a special program, is on replacing county executives in Baltimore County versus how they do it in Prince George's County. Um, it'll be the same result. They'll end up with a new county executive, but it's a very different process and race, and let's talk about it. In Baltimore County, John Olszewski Jr., better known as Johnny O, won a commanding race. It was never close from the beginning. Um, he had the name, he had the money, he had everything he needed. He had 6 very successful years as county executive to fall back on. People liked him. It was a good time. Just about as good as you can get when you're running for office. And he had a weak opponent. That's always nice to have a weak opponent. So here's what happens. There's 12 people so far who have applied for the job to replace him as county executive. And I didn't feel like talking about all 12. Um, I picked out the 4 that I thought were most likely to have a shot at this. Of course, one has the best shot of all, but we'll talk about that in a moment. Starting at the upper left-hand corner, Tara Ebersol. Um, Good, solid person. People like her. She's well respected. Um, just a nice person, and she do a good job. Um, she doesn't have the depth of political experience that some of the others do, but she'd still be a nice county executive. And directly below her, lower left-hand corner, Barry Williams, standing next to his sister, Speaker Adrian Jones of the Maryland General Assembly. Um, Barry's worked in county government, a few different jobs. Uh, People like him. He's done a good job. Uh, it's a very powerful position to be in, to have his speaker as to have his sister as the speaker. Um, she's done an amazing job, so she's got a lot of respect, and a lot of that rubs off on her brother. Um, Lower right-hand corner, we have, and I don't know how to pronounce her name, so forgive me, Yara Chaik. And if I said that wrong, my apologies. Uh, she's on the library board. She's got a nice reputation. She doesn't have a lot of government experience. You do get a taste of government on the library board, but still, it's not that much. And in the center is Senator Kathy Klossmeyer. Kathy has 8 years in the Maryland General Assembly as a delegate, then over 20 years as a senator for the state of Maryland for District 8. Um, when you're thinking, where is District 8 in Baltimore County? Um, Baltimore is punched out of the center of Baltimore County, and it's comes to a corner at the top. So if you were to look at the um, northeast corner of Baltimore, where it hits Baltimore County, the area around that corner is District 8. That's Kathy's district. Um, she's done a good job. People like her. Closest challenge she ever had was 2018, and it was a Hogan year. Uh, she was able to hold her seat. She's done very well. She's got somewhere around 30 years in office. Um, she's at the point where she is willing to run for and take 2 years. You know, if she's selected by the council, she would serve for 2 years and then she would step down. After 30 years in public office, um, nobody expects her to run, and she's made it clear she's willing to take the 2 years and call it quits. That's important because A big question about all the other candidates is if they pick anybody else to run, might they decide they like the job and want to stay around? It's not bad pay, and it's a lot of power, and it's probably one of the nicest counties to be county executive of. Plus, it's never had a woman or an African American as county executive. There's a lot of people who think Kathy Klossmeyer is the ideal person because she won't run for reelection. I hate to put it that way. I don't want to sound terrible, but um, let me explain why not running for reelection is so important. You've got a seven-member board, four Democrats, three Republicans. Three of the Democrats have announced that they want to be county executive. So let's go start at the upper left. We've got Julian Jones Jr., um, career fireman, went into politics afterwards, has had a strong career, three times as um, council chairman, um, prolific fundraiser, works with his people constantly. Um, he's done a real good job. He's very strong. He's raised more money than anybody else. He spends more money, and that can be a little bit of a factor, but still, he has the ability to raise a lot of money, and he's got to be considered the favorite in the race. Um, Upper right-hand corner, we've got Councilman Izzy Patoka. Izzy had one of the best jobs under Governor O'Malley. There's one person, and I forget, it's something like community outreach. Um, Izzy was in charge of doing nice things for churches, civic groups, um, recreation centers, civic centers, that sort of thing. So when the state has old computers they like to give them where they're going to be used by the people in a computer lab. There's books, there's food, there's all sorts of things that Izzy was in a position to give around the state, and he did a great job on it. Made him very popular. Steve Steve McAdams had the same job under Governor Hogan. Um, you make lots of friends and virtually no enemies. Nobody ever gets mad at the person giving away stuff. Um, And then in the lower center, we've got Pat Young. Pat's only had 2 years on council. Um, Pat's attracted a little bit of negative attention um, because he's a newcomer to council and he feels that he should be county executive after only 2 years in office. Some people think that's presumptuous. Um, in fact, it's gotten so bad that some people have been calling him Paycheck Pat. They say he doesn't run for a job; he runs for a paycheck. Um, Now, Pat spent his adult life in the military and then in the Maryland General Assembly and now 2 years on council. Um, I don't think that's very nice. I mean, Pat's a decent guy. There's nothing wrong with him. Um, he's ambitious, but uh, ambition is not the worst thing in the whole world. Um, but he is attracting some negative attention. Um, that's the problem he's got. Izzy is not the warmest and most friendly guy who ever ran for office. He struck me as a very nice guy, but he's more shy, more reserved. Um, Even in his home area, Pikesville, um, he doesn't have as strong a base as I would have expected. Uh, he sometimes says no, and he says it in a way that people don't like. All politicians have to say no sometimes, but the trick is to make people happy when you tell them no. Izzy hasn't quite mastered that tact yet. Julian of the three is probably the smoothest. Um, he's a good guy. He's going to be hard to beat. Now let's go down to Prince George's County. We've got a very different situation. Um, Angela Also Brooks ran a virtually miraculous campaign. Um, she ran in a primary against David Trone. who spent $61.8 million to try and beat her. She spent less than 8 million and she won. Um, People like her, people respect her. She's a fun person. One of the things is she's famous for dancing. It used to drive people crazy. Like she'd be doing a sine wave on a street corner when she was running for county executive, and she'd just start dancing. And it was so spontaneous and so happy that people loved it. Um, it really played well in Prince George's County. Even during the Senate campaign here, um, I've got 2 pictures. She was known to periodically dance with Congressman Steny Hoyer. Steny was majority leader, minority leader. I mean, he did it all. He was number 2 behind Nancy Pelosi, and he and Nancy had worked for years together, going back to when they were both interns, I think, in a congressional office. I mean, they just kind of grew mature. I don't want to say old, more mature together. And he stepped down from leadership, but he's still a congressman. Uh, he just got married. He has an amazing amount of energy for somebody who's been serving since I think the late 70s. Forgive me forgetting, but it's getting late tonight. Um, he's up in his 80s. Um, People are starting to say, one of these days, Congressman Hoyer's going to either step down or, and the general consensus is he's not going to make it much more than another 10 or 20 terms. So, sometime between when he turns 100 and 125, he'll probably step down. But until then, he just keeps on dancing. And the funny part was in a line dance with a group of politicians, Angela always gets people line dancing. So, anyway, you've got Congressman Hoyer there and Governor Moore. Now, keep in mind, Governor Moore is almost half of Congressman Hoyer's age. And yet, Hoyer was the much better dancer. Don't tell the governor I said that. I don't want to offend him, but really, um, Congressman Hoyer's got the moves, and Angela has got the moves. And she resigned December 2nd. She had to resign to force a special election, or if she didn't resign, it would have gone to like Baltimore County. It would have gone to picking by the council, which they never agree on anything. So, um, well, they don't. I guess they agree on some things, but it would have been contentious. She stepped out, and there's a race now, and it's going to be a really aggressive, hard-fought race. Let's talk about the people running. I usually start in the upper left-hand corner, so let's start there. Rushern Baker was a delegate from Cheverly, Maryland, in Prince George's County. Um, he stepped out of that to run for county executive against Jack Johnson and lost twice. I remember it well because I had one of his signs um, for county executive when he was running against Johnson. And then Johnson got indicted, took $1 million in bribes, got caught by the FBI. It was a big disgrace. The county was at a low point. Uh, it was a very ugly, unpleasant situation. And Baker won, replaced Johnson, and he did an incredible job. He brought in MGM. He worked to put together that whole development just south of 95 on the Potomac River where the MGM casino is. Um, Brought in a lot of business, helped build the tax base. Uh, he was an extremely good county executive. And when he was done with that, he ran for governor and lost. And then he ran for governor again and lost. Baker's continual problem is lack of money. Unless he wins the lotto, um, and that's got to be a big jackpot. People are assuming that he's not going to do much better this time out. Um, First time he ran for governor, he had a good chance and blew it. Um, spent too much time worried about what Mike Miller thought. We'll talk about Mike in a minute. Um, Not enough about what the voters were thinking. Lost Ben Jealous, ran again 4 years later, lost to Wes Moore. Uh, the second time he ran, he had to take public financing, um, which is jokingly referred to as being a welfare candidate. It was not a good thing. Um, he ran a lackluster campaign until late in the campaign. He hired Lynn Foxwell, Professor Lynn Foxwell of Johns Hopkins University and 14-year deputy comptroller of Maryland. Um, Foxwell came in, put together a campaign, got things going, started to move up his profile, um, especially in Baltimore, was making a big difference, and they ran out of money. Um, Baker was strictly prohibited from raising much money because he was on public financing, and that was disastrous for him. Um, by the time he got the campaign going with Foxwell on board, they ran out. Had he gone with Foxwell from the beginning, we might be calling him Governor Baker right now. Um, he's it's going to be interesting to see what he does. If he comes up with money, he could be a force in the race, but there's no sign he's going to come up with money, and consequently, he'll run a nice little campaign and probably won't do much. On elect When Angela resigned, she resigned at 10 o'clock in the morning. It took him until late afternoon to come up with a statement saying he was running, and it was just a face on his just a post on his Facebook wall that said, "Thank you for encouraging me to run. I'm going to run." It was terrible. It was absolutely terrible. Um, Not much better. Let's drop down to the lower left. Calvin Hawkins. We'll talk about him a little bit more in a minute. But Hawkins, people assumed that Angela was going to endorse him, and I haven't heard of any endorsement yet. On top of that, he apparently didn't know she was going to resign from her seat, triggering the special election. And he didn't get his campaign announcement until after dinner. Well, I eat early, but let's just say in the evening. So she resigned at 10 o'clock in the morning. He wasn't ready to go for probably 9 hours or more. That's a bad sign. If Angela didn't warn Calvin, that indicates that she's not going to support him or not support him strongly. We'll see what happens. He's a problematic candidate in a lot of ways, but we'll get more about that in a minute. Now, lower right-hand corner, we've got Aisha Brave Boy. 2 years ago, she was the front runner. She's known she wanted this seat. She's been working toward this seat, and she was far out in front, lining up support, lining up, contributors and everything. I mean, she looks so strong. And then there's a perception that she's jealous of Angela, has always been jealous of Angela, also Brooks. And David Trone, a billionaire, um, came in and was basically flashing a lot of money and attracted some people who were looking for campaign money who came in to endorse him and to hurt Angela. And it was a mean and spiteful thing. Um, Aisha's people came up with that ad where they talked about Angela needed training wheels. Well, so here's the problem with the training wheels comment. Um, when you're saying that the old white guy has got the experience and should be supported, and the black woman doesn't have the experience and needs training wheels, you're not just insulting Angela, you're insulting black women all across the country. And that's how it was taken. More than 650 of the leading African American Democratic women in the United States signed a letter, and one of them was former DNC two-time chairman Donna Brazile, who said that the ad was racist and sexist. No, racist and misogynistic. And here's the thing, a group of black people signed on to the Trump campaign. Trone campaign. There's not much difference. They sign on to the Trone campaign and they get involved with a racist and misogynistic ad against Angela, and it blew up. It was a national scandal. It hit the major newspapers and magazines across the country. And when she was the front runner 2 years ago, I would say now that the question is she going to finish in third place or fourth place? Um, she could end up in fourth place behind Baker and um, Calvin. It's going to be ugly. She never should have done the training wheels ad. She never should have organized the protests against Angela. She never should have organized the dirty tricks. She never should have done the things she did. She's going to have a tough time digging her way out of this. She's got to come up with some way to explain her involvement in the Trone campaign that doesn't sound like I hated Angela and I was out to screw her to the wall. She took a big risk. Let's talk about the big risk. The story was that she was going to get campaign money. David Trone was going to finance her campaign. He was just going to shower money down on her head. There were stories that um, apparently Aisha likes blimp, uh, has a great fondness for the Goodyear blimp. Um, and the story was that Trone was going to buy her either buy or lease, I'm not sure which, was going to get her a blimp for her to campaign across Prince George's County by blimp, so she could like fly over places and point the loudspeakers down to the people below. Anyway, um, she even went out and got a special dress for it, and you know whether it's true or not, it was just one of those things where there was a lot of talk going around about how she was going to get a lot of money from David Trone. So the perception is that she sold Angela Alsobrooks down the river to take the white man's money. That's a rough spot to be in for Prince George's County. It's a majority black um, county with a large Hispanic population. The idea that you sold out your county to the old white billionaire, that's a ticklish spot. Let's talk about another issue. Um, there's a lot of people across the country who think Wes Moore would make a really good president, and Trump can only serve one term. Um, by the Constitution of the United States, it's different than the Constitution of Maryland. In Maryland, you can serve non-consecutive terms of more than 2 terms, um, but the U.S. Constitution says 2 terms and you're done. Trump served one, he served another. By law, he vacates the presidency. He can't run again. He can't be president. Um, if he were to try to be president past the one term that he has left, that would be an act of treason. I'm sure he would never do such a thing. Anyway, Moore's on the short list of people who'd make a great candidate for president. Um, he speaks well. He looks good. He identifies well with people. I mean, he can get out there and talk with the billionaires, and he can get on the football field and toss the ball around with the with the Navy or the University of Maryland team. I mean, uh, he's got it all. He'd be a great candidate. But he's got to be very careful of who he gets his picture taken with, and that's something that's bothering his supporters. Take a look at this picture. It's an easy picture to take because he's there with his fraternity brothers, um, all prominent in public life in Maryland. Something like that's a good picture. Some people are worried that standing next to the county executive of Prince George's County, if he is an ex-con and I don't even know the right term for it, a person who assaults women, takes advantage of women, forces women into things they don't want to do. That would be a very bad thing for a person looking to run for president. So there's people out there who feel that Westmore can't stand next to Calvin to get his picture taken. At least if it happens, it can't happen all the time. If it becomes the picture that the candidate for president and the ex-con, that's a tough sell. Um, so there appears to be a lot of people who are working to keep Calvin from being county executive. They want somebody more respectable. They don't especially want Aisha because who could trust her after what she's done? Um, they like Jolene. I mean, Jolene would make an absolutely fantastic county executive from that perspective. The visuals would be good. Her reputation is good. Jolene's never been in prison. She's never been arrested. She's a really nice person, and that goes a long way. Plus, she has a husband who's a congressman and a son who's a delegate. That doesn't hurt either. Um, she'd make the best candidate to stand next to Westmore, and that's what a lot of people at a high level are thinking. Um, it's not going to impact the voters that much, but it's probably going to impact the endorsements and the fundraising. Expect Jolene to raise a lot of money. Expect Calvin to find more challenges in raising money than he anticipated. Calvin's a problem in a lot of ways. Spent time in prison for armed robbery. Um, the episode with a woman. Now he's gone out and he's was the tie-breaking vote to put a really low-life candidate, Edward Burrows. Ed's bad news. Ed's a councilman who's not terribly honest and someone who's personally lied to me, and I don't like people who lie to me. Um, Calvin was mad at Sidney Harrison, so he tipped the election and took the vice chairmanship away from Sidney and gave it to a lowlife. Um, I, for one, figure, okay, we gave him a break on the armed robbery and we gave him a break on assaulting the woman. But the Bible talks about, a dog returns to its vomit, and a sow, even once washed, will return to wallow in the mud. Well, that's kind of talking about Calvin. He's the kind of guy who just seems to go back time and time again and get himself into messes that he doesn't have to get. He didn't rob that store because he was going to give the money like Robin Hood to the poor. He robbed it because he was selfish. He took advantage of that woman because he decided he wanted her, he'd take her. He didn't care what she wanted. He wanted what he wanted. And then he wanted to hurt Sidney Harrison, so he supported Edward Burrows III. Um, that shows me a pattern that I could never trust and could never respect. I think it's a shame, but considering how he'd be harmful to the governor's reelection campaign, it is what it is. I'd like to thank my friends at Jimmy's Famous Seafood. They always take good care of me. I really appreciate them. Um, and that's it for this evening. I want to thank everybody very much.